One time after my parents split up, my sister Becky decided to go live with our rich old man Trent, while I ended up staying with mom, Lana, in a modest rented flat. A couple of years down the line, Trent blew his cash away on booze and gambling binges, whereas Lana kicked off an online live streaming venture that soon blossomed into a wildly successful business. Then things took a nosedive for Becky, and she came crying to me. But in a moment when I wasn't fully on guard, she even tried to slip something into my drink to poison me. We share the same folks. Why do you always get the good breaks while I'm left in the dust? She griped. When I blinked my eyes open again, it was like I'd been thrown back to the day our parents divorced. This time around, Becky bolted straight to mom, clinging tight and declaring, I'm sticking with you, mom, no matter what. Little did she realize Lana was far tougher than Trent ever was. Becky had always had a knack for sweet talk and charm, earning her more favoritism than me. So when our parents decided to call it quits, they asked her first which side she'd choose. Trent was loaded, a trust fund kid through and through, while Lana, a dedicated homemaker, was left with practically nothing after the split. Without missing a beat, Becky threw her arms around Trent, exclaiming, I love you so much, Dad. I can't live without you. I want to grow up with you. Oh, Trent was over the moon, lifting her up high and calling her his little princess forever. With a smug little smirk hidden from our parents' eyes, she shot me a look that screamed she'd always been fiercely competitive, even if it meant hurting herself along the way. Trent and Becky laughed together while Lana stood there, heartbroken. I kept quiet for a minute before taking Lana's hand and saying, Mom, I'm willing to be with you too. A few years later, purely by chance, Lana's streaming biz took off. We upgraded our life, first from that rundown apartment to a nice community home, and eventually to a sleek villa. Her beat-up old electric bike got replaced, first with a shiny Mercedes and later even a Porsche. One day, while Lana was driving us out, we encountered a chaotic scene. A scooter rider, barreling the wrong way, had crashed into a luxury car. The owner of the fancy car was hollering madly while the scooter guy was apologizing over and over. His daughter was bawling her eyes out beside him, only to be unceremoniously kicked aside by him out of pure shame. Then, as fate would have it, the tearful little girl caught my eye through the car window. It was Becky. I glanced at the remorseful scooter rider and realized it was none other than our own Trent. Becky spotted us too and bolted after our car, but Lana floored the accelerator as if nothing had happened. I hesitated and softly said, Mom, that was Becky. Lana coolly replied, Yeah, I saw her. So what? Are you planning to help her out? I couldn't bring myself to retort. Lana even let out a little snicker, remarking how adorable Becky had been as a kid, but how now she'd grown as ugly as her old man. A cold ingrate, paying for her own karma. Not long after, Becky reached out, desperate to meet up. We found ourselves in a quiet cafe where she broke down sobbing. Sis, you don't have any idea. Dad is a total moron. She went on to rant about how Trent, once a man of means, fell for a dodgy investment tip from a so-called friend and lost millions in a scam. Her granddad, George, was furious and promptly cut him off. I'd thought Trent might learn from his mistakes, but nope. He simply sunk deeper into a spiral of drinking, gambling, and partying every night, amassing debts of over $600,000. With Granddad's financial support severed, Trent ended up delivering food just to scrape by, clueless about even the basics of traffic rules. Not long after starting his delivery gig, he ended up crashing into that same luxury car I'd seen earlier, a moment that still haunts me. Later at the cafe, Becky clung to me and tearfully said, Sis, I saw Mom driving that Porsche, rocking Chanel, and you even had a Dior bag. You must be rolling in it. Becky, I replied, could you talk to Mom? I'm her daughter too. I don't want to live with Dad anymore. I want to be with her. For 4 long years after our split, she'd been calling, pleading for me to come back, her eyes brimming with hope. But just the thought of being with Mom sent shivers down my spine. In the end, I mumbled, I can't bring you in, but here's some cash. Becky's eyes widened for a split second before she covered it up with a grateful smile. The very next day, I wired her $50,000. She invited me over to her shabby rented apartment for a meal, and when she handed me a cup of tea, she said, "Sis, I remember you loved jasmine tea as a kid. I picked this up just for you. Like, you dig it?" I drank it without a hint of suspicion until the room started spinning and I felt dizzy. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was Becky slashing my face with a knife, snarling, "Lola, we're both our parents' kids. Why do you always get the good life while I suffer? You're rich, but you only threw me a bit of cash and won't let me live with mom. You're such a selfish prick." When the darkness lifted, I found myself back on that fateful day of the divorce. Facing Dad's question, Becky clung desperately to Mom, insisting, "I can't be without Mom. I'll stay with her no matter what." Lana tearfully embraced Becky. While out of earshot, Becky flashed me a sly, scheming grin as if to say, "This time it's all mine." And so Becky was reborn, though little did she know that Mom was far more formidable than Dad. While she strutted off to her new apartment, I stayed behind at the villa. Trent, ever the irresponsible slob, had just gotten divorced and was already scheming about hitting up a nightclub later that night. On the phone, some lover's voice oozed sweet nothings, and Dad was practically in stitches. As he grabbed his jacket and prepared to leave, I stopped him. "Dad, who's having dinner with me tonight?" I asked. He replied flatly, "Isn't the nanny there? Let her eat with you." I bit my lip and said, "I haven't seen Grandpa George in ages. I kind of miss him." Trent hesitated for a moment, then, noticing my mood, he added, "All right, I'll take you to see him." Grandpa George lived in a secluded lakeside villa, and he had always looked down on Lana, seeing her as nothing but a schemer who'd done whatever it took to climb up with Dad. Back when our parents split, Becky had tried to please Grandpa, but at home, she was just his spoiled little princess, always playing the role of the obedient, innocent child. In contrast, our cousin Calvin, an ace student with a head for finance and economics, had always been George's pride and joy. I still remember the first time in George's dusty, old study when he quizzed Calvin on his lessons. The questions were brutal, and though Calvin nailed the initial ones, a particularly tough one left him stumped for a while. I timidly raised my hand and said, "Grandpa, may I share my thoughts?" He shot me a skeptical look and replied, "You're only 14, Lola. What could you possibly say?" I smiled and added, "If my answer isn't good enough, I'll just step outside as punishment. No biggie." Grandpa snorted and Calvin piped up, "Why not let little sis give it a try?" His suggestion won me a begrudging nod from Grandpa, and I went on to explain that these early entrepreneurs had started with some shady initial funds. They'd acted as middlemen to help foreign companies break into our market, raking in massive profits by exploiting information gaps. Grandpa's eyes widened in surprise, and he prodded further. "Then what do you say is their main advantage and what's their downfall?" I thought for a moment and answered, "Their early ties with foreign firms gave them a leg up in the market, but they became overly dependent on that first mover edge. Without their own competitiveness, their advantage faded as soon as regulations kicked in." For a long moment, Grandpa just stared at me, his expression a mix of doubt and grudging respect, until he finally asked, "You're only 14. Where'd you pick up all this knowledge?" I mumbled that the city library was my second home and that I loved reading, though deep down I knew it wasn't all true. Many of Lana's clients had been middlemen, exploiting nepotism and info gaps, all while bragging about their skills. I shut my eyes tight, memories flooding back, and when I opened them again, I was still in Grandpa's strict, old-fashioned study, not that neon-lit bedroom from before. Calvin clapped softly and said, "Lola, you might only be 14, but you've got the brains and the guts. Seriously impressive." He looked at me with genuine warmth, and I couldn't help but feel a mix of gratitude and inferiority. I quickly brushed it off, claiming it was just luck and that I had a lot to learn. As time went by, I wasn't just an observer in Grandpa's study anymore. Our debates with Calvin over business tactics grew heated, and Grandpa eventually stopped eyeing me with suspicion. At school, my hard work paid off when I snagged first prize in a math competition. The teacher even promised to mention my achievement at the parent-teacher meeting. True to form, Dad bailed last minute, saying he had an important meeting and that the nanny would fill in for him. I could hear the background laughter from some women, but I didn't call him out. Instead, I sent a picture of the award list with both my name and Calvin's shining like stars to Grandpa with a note saying, "Dad can't make it, but the teacher is eager to talk about my future. Can you come?" Grandpa showed up personally, a treatment even Calvin hadn't received. My homeroom teacher was all nerves, and the principal practically rushed over. Grandpa then calmly took the principal's chair and asked, "How's my granddaughter doing? Anything she needs to work on?" The teacher gushed with praise, and after a satisfied nod from Grandpa, he ordered the driver to take us to the mall. I noticed the girls in my class dressed all flashy, and Grandpa even teased, "Why do you look so plain? Does Dad not treat you right?" In the end, he bought me 6 or 7 outfits and a few bags. When I nervously asked, "Grandpa, aren't you worried I'm just after your cash now?" He burst into hearty laughter, saying, "I'd be worried if you weren't already." Becky, on the other hand, tried every trick in the book, flattery, cuteness, and playing coy to win Grandpa over. But she just didn't get it. Grandpa, a self-made entrepreneur who'd seen through all the sugar-coated nonsense, wasn't swayed by her half-hearted attempts. As years passed, Grandpa even renovated a special study for Calvin and me. One afternoon, while we were playing Go, news broke that Dad had stubbornly invested tens of millions in a dodgy shell company, which had now exploded in a spectacular failure. From the next room, I could hear Grandpa's furious roars. "You numbnuts, how many times did I warn you that company was trash? I don't want to hear your excuses anymore. You're no son of mine. Get out." My heart sank. Just like in a past life, it seemed Grandpa was about to disown Dad, and I wasn't sure if this time I'd be next. Like how Becky got kicked out before. Suddenly, the study door slammed open. Grandpa stormed in, eyes blazing. "Lola, come out here!" Calvin quickly stepped in front of me, protesting, "Grandpa, whatever Dad did, Lola's innocent." But Grandpa snapped, "This isn't about you, Calvin." Calvin wanted to add more, but I gently tugged his sleeve, whispering, "It's all good, bro. I bet Grandpa just wants a word with me." Inside that solemn study, the aroma of pu'er tea lingered as I respectfully brewed and served a cup for Grandpa, then quietly retreated to a corner. He studied me for what felt like ages, his aged eyes seeming to strip away all my pretenses. Finally, he broke the silence. "I'm thinking of cutting ties with your father. What say you?" I sighed and replied, "Dad made a massive mistake by not listening to reason. He should have known better." Grandpa retorted, "I'm not buying any of your excuses." I almost sighed again, wondering why even bother persuading him. I recalled a conversation we'd had about family-run businesses and how sometimes if the family isn't up to par, the company ought to be handed over to a professional. "You know better than I do about Dad's abilities," I admitted. "If I tried to convince you otherwise, I'd be betraying my own conscience." Grandpa squinted. "If I kick him out, things might get rough for you. Are you cool with that?" I chuckled helplessly. "It's your money. You can do what you want. As for me, I'll figure out my tuition through tutoring or internships. I'm good." Soon after, Grandpa booted Dad out of the house, but made sure my luggage was moved into his own place. From then on, I had my very own room in the lakeside villa. No more dealing with the random women Dad kept bringing home because I was now officially Grandpa George's granddaughter, under his careful protection. One day after school, I unexpectedly bumped into Becky. She was decked out in a seductive ensemble of luxury brands, slick makeup, heavy false lashes, the whole 9 yards. She eyed me up and down with a dismissive snort. "Lola, what are you doing here? Can you even afford a place like this?" I glanced down at myself. My sneakers had barely survived basketball practice, and I was rocking some plain, well-worn sportswear. Unlike those flashy girls obsessed with bracelets and necklaces, I preferred comfort over bling. The fancy jewelry Grandpa gave me was still hanging untouched in my closet. Becky smirked. "You're so pathetic, sis. Not like me. I've got 2 Hermes bags and a closet full of pretty dresses. I live like a freaking princess every day." I wasn't about to argue. I just asked, "I haven't seen you at school since last year. Did you transfer?" She snapped back, School's for losers now. I learn dance every day, and mom even helps me with makeup and skincare. Girls don't need to study much. Beauty is all that matters. Check out my double eyelids. Way better than your measly single ones. And my hands? I get full body treatments weekly, so they're as smooth as boneless jade, unlike your calloused ones. I looked at my palm. Sure, I had a few calluses from writing and gym sessions, but I liked having hands that could actually handle life's challenges. Becky rolled her eyes. Jealous much? But don't think you can ever go back to mom. She only digs well behaved daughters, not you. I couldn't help but let out a quiet laugh. Yeah, mom did favor the goody two shoes. Back when I was younger, I'd never dared defy her, and she'd clobbered me for it. Becky clearly believed that the designer outfits and chic accessories mom gave were tokens of love. But little did she know, they were like tickets to a living nightmare. Those pretty dresses would eventually get torn apart, and those beautiful faces would end up exploited. Amid all that glitz and glamour, some old men got their kicks out of watching young girls grovel for mercy. There's no such thing as a free lunch, after all. After high school, I managed to get into a top business school in the States, reuniting with Calvin as a classmate. Grandpa was over the moon, throwing a going-away party, and Calvin even flew in from abroad just to celebrate with me. During the toast, a middle-aged dude in a suit tried to heap compliments on me. Apparently, I was a real granddaughter of George sort of deal. The saying, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, was tossed around, though everyone quietly knew that Grandpa's own apple was nothing but a bumbling fool, barely scraping by as he worked to pay off his debts. I raised my glass in a toast, and the moment I caught sight of that guy, a chill ran down my spine. I couldn't forget his face. He had a noticeable mole above his right eyebrow, a scar on his ear, and an unsightly birthmark on his chest. How did I know him? Because he'd been a regular at Mom's place. In the pastel pink bathroom of the luxury villa, Zane's twisted pastime was yanking my hair and dunking me underwater in the bathtub, over and over again. He'd whisper that my near suffocation gave him a weird kind of pleasure and claimed that even if he killed me, Mom wouldn't bat an eye, so it was best not to fight back. When I saw my reaction, Calvin quickly slid my glass away, covering for me as best he could. Later on, Becky, always the drama queen, tried to win over Grandpa with her cuteness and coy flattery. But she just didn't get it. Grandpa, a self-made entrepreneur who'd seen plenty of sugar-coated bullshit in his time, wasn't impressed by her feeble attempts. An aging leader like him craved genuine, vibrant successors, someone who could hold their own. All I had to do was keep proving myself, and eventually, I'd become another one of his prized protégés. Years later, Grandpa even had a study specially renovated for Calvin and me. While we were engrossed in a game of Go one afternoon, news blasted in that Dad, defiant as ever despite Grandpa's warnings, had insisted on sinking tens of millions into a shady shell company. And now it had spectacularly imploded. I could hear Grandpa's thunderous roars from the adjacent room. You numbskull, how many times did I tell you that company was trash? Why didn't you listen? Forget your excuses. You're no son of mine. Get out. I'm considering you dead. My heart sank. It was just like in my previous life when Grandpa was ready to cut Dad off for good. I wasn't sure if this time he'd take it out on me too, like he did with Becky. Bang! The study door crashed open. Grandpa, red-faced and furious, bellowed, "Lola, come out here!" Calvin jumped up, shielding me. "Grandpa, whatever Dad did, Lola's innocent." But Grandpa snapped back. "This has nothing to do with you." Calvin wanted to argue more, but I gently tugged his sleeve, whispering, "It's cool, brother. I bet Grandpa just wants a word with me." Inside that stern old study, the aroma of brewed pu'er tea hung in the air. I respectfully poured a cup for Grandpa, set it down, and then sat silently in the corner, letting him scrutinize me. After what felt like forever, he finally said, "I'm planning to sever ties with your father. What do you think?" I replied softly, "Dad screwed up big time by not listening. He should have known better." Grandpa shot back, "You're not going to talk me out of this." I sighed, thinking, why even try? I recalled how, not long ago, during a discussion about the rise and fall of family-run businesses in America, I had suggested that if family members aren't talented enough, The company should be turned over to a professional manager. You know my dad's shortcomings all too well, I admitted. If I tried to convince him otherwise, it'd feel like betraying my own guts. Grandpa narrowed his eyes. If I boot him out, things might get rough for you. Are you cool with that? I chuckled with a mix of resignation and humor. It's your cash, do as you please. I'll figure out my tuition on my own. I'm not sweating it. Soon enough, Grandpa kicked Dad out of the house, but he made sure my stuff was moved into his own home. From that point on, I had a room all to myself in the lakeside villa. No more dealing with the random women Dad dragged home because I was now officially Grandpa George's granddaughter, protected and cherished. Then, one day after school, I unexpectedly bumped into Becky again. This time, she was rocking a seductive look, decked out in luxury labels and slick makeup, with long, fluttering false lashes that practically danced in the light. Becky looked me up and down with an exaggerated wrinkle of her nose. Lola, what are you doing here? You can't seriously be living like this, can you? I glanced down at my sneakers, which had seen better days after basketball practice, and my plain, comfy sportswear. Unlike those flashy girls obsessed with accessories, I wasn't about that life. My stash of designer jewelry from Grandpa still sat untouched in the closet. Seeing my silence, Becky smirked. Ugh, you're such a loser, sis. Not like me. I've got 2 Hermes bags and a closet full of killer dresses. I literally live like a princess every day. I couldn't muster a retort, so I simply asked, Did you transfer schools or what? I haven't seen you around since last year. She snapped back, School's for suckers now. I learn dance every day, and Mom even helps me with makeup and skincare. Girls don't need to hit the books. Beauty's the real deal. Check these double eyelids, babe. And look at my hands. I get full body treatments weekly, so they're as smooth as like boneless jade. Unlike your rough calloused ones. I stared at my own hand, noting the evidence of hard work from writing and gym sessions. I thought, man, strong hands would be cool to handle life's punches. Then Becky sneered. So you're just gonna stick with Dad, huh? Don't think you can ever go back to Mom. She only digs daughters who behave, not you. I couldn't help but let out a soft laugh. Yeah, Mom definitely preferred the well-behaved ones. Back in the day, I'd never dared stand up to her, and she'd beaten me up for it. Becky assumed Mom's fancy makeup, short skirts, and designer bags were all tokens of her love. Little did she know, they were more like tickets to a living hell. Those pretty dresses would eventually get ripped to shreds, and those flawless faces would end up exploited. Beneath all the glitz and glam, some old dudes got off on watching young girls beg for mercy. There's no such thing as a free ride, you know? After graduating high school, I managed to land a spot at a top business school in the US, reuniting with Calvin, who by then felt more like a brother than a cousin. Grandpa was overjoyed. He threw me a huge farewell bash, and Calvin even flew in from overseas just to celebrate with me. During the toast, some middle-aged suit tried laying on the flattery thick, calling me a true granddaughter of George, as if the saying the apple doesn't fall far from the tree held any weight. Everybody tiptoed around the fact that Grandpa's own apple was frankly a bumbling fool who was barely keeping afloat while paying off debts. I raised my glass in a toast, but then I caught sight of a man whose presence chilled me to the bone. This guy, Zane, had a pronounced mole above his right eyebrow, a scar on his ear, and a hideous birthmark on his chest. I recognized him immediately. He'd been a regular at Mom's pad, where, in the neon pink bathroom of that fancy villa, his favorite twisted pastime was yanking my hair and dunking me underwater in the bathtub over and over. I'd never forget that face. As soon as Zane's image hit me, Calvin swiftly snatched my glass away, covering for me. My sister Becky, who couldn't handle her liquor to save her life, ended up taking his place, much to everyone's amusement. Amid cheers praising the blessed union of our fractured family, only Grandpa noticed my discomfort and suggested I take a breather in the lounge. There, while I sipped cold water to steady my nerves, I decided to call Becky. Hey sis, how've you been? I asked over the phone. On the other end, Becky's tone was dismissive as she retorted, Oh, so now that you've had it rough with Dad, you're thinking of me? Didn't you always think I was the stubborn one? If you want to come back, you better be begging on your knees. I shook my head, explaining, Nah, I just wanted to see how you were doing. She snickered. Aha, playing nice now? Bet you secretly wished I was down on my luck. Too bad I'm thriving. I'm with a rich, powerful boyfriend now, and I'm pretty much running mom's company. You'd better watch yourself, or you might end up delivering food with dad. With that, Becky hung up, leaving me staring at my phone in a daze. In another twist of fate, after the divorce, Mom, Lana, had somehow inherited some assets but was so used to luxury that she couldn't handle a frugal life. Before long, she reverted to her old self, chasing after rich guys again, though she was well past her prime. Despite all her upkeep, she couldn't compete with the beauty of younger women. After a string of failures, she realized that while these men lost interest in her, they were all too keen on her daughter. And that's when my living nightmare truly began. I eventually returned home, and it was almost Grandpa George's birthday. I grabbed Calvin to go gift shopping for him and unexpectedly bumped into Becky at an auction. She was rocking a super tight camisole dress and vibrant makeup that screamed for attention. When she saw me, her face lit up. Lola, what are you doing here? Can you even afford a place like this? Then she glanced over her shoulder at Calvin, looking cool in a silver gray shirt and a sharp black suit, and her eyes went wide, as if she'd seen a ghost. Calvin simply nodded. Yeah, it's me. Becky then demanded, And who are you supposed to be? I don't remember you. She used to look a lot like me, but now she had all sorts of cosmetic surgeries. Double eyelids, a reshaped nose, even a boob job. With all that heavy makeup and a flashy outfit, she was almost unrecognizable. It didn't surprise me that Calvin didn't remember her at first, but when he asked, So, are you seducing Calvin to escape your tough life or what? Becky lost it, flailing about and yelling that I was defending her. Did you know your family's bankrupt now? Your dad's delivering food, getting cursed every day, and you still act like you're hot stuff. Calvin's brow furrowed, and he calmly said, I think you've got it all wrong. Uncle got booted, but Lola wasn't. She's even in college now, and Grandpa has high hopes for her. Becky looked like she'd been struck by lightning. That's impossible. Lola should be out there delivering food with Dad, not studying at a top school. I was too tired to deal with her, so I grabbed Calvin, ready to leave. But Becky blocked my way, fuming. How come Grandpa favors you? He doesn't even care about me. I looked at her with pity and murmured, Didn't you choose Dad? Becky stammered, pointing shakily at me. Did you come back too? I only managed to reply, both times. I once wanted to save her, but in my previous life, Dad went bankrupt, and Becky begged me to take her to Mom's big house, only for her to end up poisoning me and ending my life. This time around, I met Zane again and realized that Lana might be up to the same shady tricks. I called Becky, but instead of feeling any shame, she was oddly proud, helping Mom suppress other girls. A news report later exposed it all, painting Lana as a villain who sold her own daughters for profit, while Becky was even worse, coming up with tortures far more brutal than Lana's. Looking at the person behind the glass in the visitation room, I felt absolutely no sympathy. Becky, I warned coolly, no matter what you choose, your end won't be pretty. You treat people like tools to get rich, chasing some lazy dream. Even if old dudes torment you, you think it's more noble than working hard? Think again. Becky laughed and cried simultaneously, her voice cracking. No, I need another shot. I need to start over. She lunged at me with a twisted expression, but there was a thick glass barrier between us. With a loud thud, she slammed into the glass before the guards dragged her away, her shrill cries echoing down the hall. I just smiled. Seriously, who really doesn't end well? Not long after, I heard on the news that Lana had died. By then, I'd already rotated through different departments at the company. I later learned that Lana had been locked up in the same cell as a mother who'd been victimized, a scam artist who tricked everyone just to get money for her daughter's treatment. But once in jail, her daughter was lured, duped, imprisoned, and tormented by Lana herself. One night, that desperate mother finally ended Lana's life in a horrific way. When a staffer later called asking if I wanted to claim her ashes, I just said, nah, toss 'em, whatever. I hung up and got back to work on my own plans. During my rotations, I occasionally griped to Grandpa about the insane overtime everyone was pulling. True to form, he cracked down on the nonsense, firing HR and department heads who'd brought in that toxic culture. By that point, Calvin had become the backbone of our company's divisions. Even though he sometimes struggled with staying connected to the front lines, he'd often come to me for help. I wasn't a genius or anything, I just kept my true self under wraps when I got hired, letting me blend in, catch all the juicy gossip, and help Calvin identify the folks everyone secretly hated but the bosses adored. Then, Calvin would swoop in and save the day. On a Friday, Calvin picked me up to head to Grandpa's for dinner. In the car, upbeat music played, and outside, a bright moon hung low over the river. Out of nowhere, Calvin teased, "You know, when I was a kid, I thought you were just like your mom." I shot back, "Yo, you all right with that, bro?" And he just laughed, a soft smile on his lips. Then he added, "Actually, you're more like Grandma, the one who stood by Grandpa and helped kickstart his empire, holding up half the sky as a co-founder." Guilt tugged at me as I muttered, "I've always said it was my hard work that got Grandpa's attention, but honestly, it was you who helped me out." After my thanks, Calvin grinned. Suddenly, a red light forced us to stop. He slammed the brakes and playfully flicked my forehead. "You, Missy, we're family. No need to thank me. And hey, remember when Becky shoved me into that lake and you jumped in to save me?" I was taken aback. Calvin added earnestly, "Even though you barely reached my waist back then and kinda made it worse, you still meant well." I burst out laughing. The night breeze was gentle, the moon was bright, and soft piano melodies seemed to dance in the air. Calvin leaned in and said, "Lola, everything in this world comes back around. So, instead of thanking me, thank yourself. 'Cause you're a good person. Even if we hadn't met, you'd find someone who gets you." I looked down, smiling with a few tears in my eyes, remembering a time when I lived in a home full of manipulation and cold distance. Mom cared only about money, Dad was all about chasing women, and Becky, sweet on the surface, was always scheming dirty tricks against me. Later, Mom whisked me away and I thought I'd finally start a fresh life. But she used such a cruel method that nearly broke me. For years, every day a different guy would barge into my room. I couldn't even sleep, terrified of waking up to a stranger's face. What baffled me the most was that Mom was the one handing me over like some kind of gift. She was supposed to love me the most. "Mom, why'd you do this?" I'd wonder. A thousand whys twisting inside me like a knife on my wrist, or like the pills I'd swallow to ease the pain of not even being able to die. Thankfully, everything eventually changed. Now I'm surrounded by a serious yet caring Grandpa George and an impressive, honorable brother in Calvin. They support me, watch over me, and let me grow freely. My room is cozy and cute, filled with adorable kittens, playful puppies, and the latest biz mags. So far removed from all that darkness, pain, and that terrifying feeling of being choked by the past. I wiped away my tears, looked out the car window at the big, bright moon, and Calvin, sensing something was up, casually shifted the topic. Then, Grandpa slyly asked what birthday gift I wanted for you. I thought for a sec and said, "Don't buy anything, I just want his killer fried rice." Calvin laughed exaggeratedly. "No way, Missy. You're that easy to please." And I couldn't help but join in the laugh. Isn't it awesome that someone's out there making me happy with a home-cooked meal? Someone's willing to cook for me, so I can bask in the sunlight, living clean and fearless. That, truly, is the best gift life's ever given me. Looking back, if I'd chosen Dad, this would have been my fate. Top schools, a fancy mansion, and all the perks of being the heir to the family business. But I knew better. I glanced at Becky with pity. "Didn't you choose Dad?" I murmured. In a daze, she stuttered, "Did you come back too?" I only managed to say, "Both times." "I once wanted to save you, Becky, but in my previous life, Dad went bankrupt, and you begged me to take you to Mom's big house, only to end up poisoning me and, well, ending my life. This time around, after meeting Zane again, I realized that Lana might be pulling the same shady moves. I called Becky, but she didn't see any shame in it. In fact, she was almost proud, helping mom suppress other girls. A news report later exposed it all, screaming that Lana was a monster for selling her own daughters for profit, while Becky was even worse, cooking up tortures more brutal than anything Lana ever dreamed up. Staring at the person on the other side of the glass in the prison visiting room, I felt absolutely nothing. Becky, I said coolly, no matter what path you choose, your ending's not going to be pretty. You treat people like stepping stones for cash and comfort, chasing a lazy dream your whole life. Even when old men torment you, you act like it's more honorable than honest work. Becky burst into a wild mix of laughter and tears, nearly losing it. No, I need another chance. I need to start over. She lunged at me with a twisted look, but there was that thick glass barrier between us. She slammed against it with a thud, and then the guards hauled her away as her desperate cries echoed down the hall. I just smiled to myself. Really, who doesn't end up in a mess? Not long after, I caught wind that Lana had died. By then, I'd already rotated through various departments at the company. I heard a rumor that Lana was locked up in the same cell as a woman who had been victimized, a scam artist who tricked everyone just to fund her daughter's medical bills. But once jailed, her daughter had been lured, duped, and tormented by Lana. One night, that desperate mom finally ended Lana's miserable life. They said it was horrific. Later, a staffer called asking if I wanted to claim her ashes. I paused, the weight of those words sinking in. I'd already come to terms with so much: the betrayal, the endless cycle of family drama, and the constant reminder that every glittering gift came with a hidden price. That call marked the turning point. I wasn't going to let the ghosts of the past dictate my future any longer. In the weeks that followed, the fallout from Lana's downfall rippled through every corner of our lives. The news was relentless. Details of the corruption, scandalous deals, and the unspeakable things that had been done in the name of profit. It wasn't just headlines. It was a wake-up call for everyone who'd ever believed that wealth and success could mask the darkest parts of human nature. I spent many sleepless nights poring over the reports, trying to piece together the shattered remnants of a family legacy that had always seemed more like a curse than a blessing. Meanwhile, Becky's behavior grew even more erratic. One day, she stormed into one of the company's board meetings, her eyes wild and her voice louder than usual, demanding that everyone acknowledge her supposed rights to a piece of the empire. With a sneer that barely masked her desperation, she shouted, "You all know who's really been pulling the strings. I'm not some forgotten extra in this family play." But the room fell into an icy silence. Grandpa George's steely gaze swept over her before he calmly said, "Becky, enough. Your theatrics only prove that you never learned how to earn respect." His words cut deep, and for the first time, I saw a glimpse of the truth in her reflection, a bitter realization that all her scheming had left her alone and unmoored. As for me, I slowly began carving out a life that wasn't defined by the ruins of my past. I dedicated myself to my studies, determined to prove that my worth wasn't measured by the family drama that haunted me. Calvin and I worked side by side in the company, not just as colleagues, but as silent rebels challenging the old order. We dug deep into the market, uncovering hidden trends and opportunities that the old guard had long overlooked. Every small success was a victory over the chaos that once reigned in our home. The turning point came on a crisp autumn evening during one of our late-night brainstorming sessions in Grandpa's study. Over steaming cups of pure tea, Calvin leaned back and said, "Lola, maybe it's time to leave all that mess behind. Make a clean break." His tone wasn't accusatory. It was filled with the kind of camaraderie that only years of shared struggle can forge. I thought about it long and hard. The past was a labyrinth of betrayal, deceit, and shattered dreams. But I'd also learned that even in the darkest moments, a spark of hope could ignite change. That night, as I walked home under a sky studded with stars, I made a promise to myself. I would no longer let the legacy of broken promises and bitter rivalries define who I was. I would channel every scar, every painful memory into building a future that was mine alone, a future where I could finally live without the suffocating weight of family expectations. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, I began to see the possibility of a life free from the chains of the past. I enrolled in courses, not just to hone my business acumen, but to rediscover the simple pleasures of life: late night walks, spontaneous laughter, and the comfort of genuine friendships. Even the occasional text from Calvin, filled with a mix of dry humor and heartfelt encouragement, reminded me that I wasn't alone in this struggle. Looking back now, the journey was far from over, but I had finally learned to take control. Every step forward was a defiant act of reclaiming my identity, a promise that I would rise above the toxic legacy of my family. And as I stared up at the moon that night, its bright glow a silent testament to renewal, I realized that sometimes the best gift life can offer is the chance to start over, clean and fearless, ready to write a new story.